can you transform? How can you feel better? How can you do better with money and feel better and do better with everything that money influences and impacts in your life?
Hey, soul family. Welcome to the Alive and Awake podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kay, and I have spent the last 20 years teaching people how to work with their wounds and overcome their greatest fears so they can learn how to thrive in a world where they were only taught to conform. Each week, we will dive deep into the practical, the spiritual, and the mystical so I can teach you how to do the inner work to know yourself, trust yourself, and eventually love yourself enough to create a world where you feel fully alive, awake, and free. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode. Ready? Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. I am here with my own personal wealth coach, Christine Mathieu, and she came to my life in such a really profound way. But before we get into the story of how we met, let's talk about her and what it is that she offers. So in a traditional world, we think that we need to hire a financial planner to help us with our money and our money management. But Christine comes at the perfect time to actually help us transition our relationship with money and our spending habits and the decisions that we use in order to, to manage our money, right? And she has an extensive background, which I absolutely can love and can relate to. She is a certified wealth coach, a certified money coach, and she also is a metaphysical minister with a bachelor's degree in metaphysical science. So she is all about spirituality, all about energy, and the belief that what we put our energy into is what we produce. So I am so grateful to have you here on the call. I've been looking forward to this all week long because I know, because really what I believe is that we use money as a measurement to either shame ourselves, right? Like if we don't have any, then we should be ashamed. And we use it as a measurement for our success. If we have enough, then we're successful. And so we create this really polarized relationship in our culture with money. And then we use that as the deciding factor for how we feel about ourselves. And I love that this is what you help people really get in touch with when it comes to how they think about money, how they feel about money, how they manifest money, how they manage money, all the things with this like currency that we've created that we put our wealth that we put our worth into. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into it? I know you said you went through some major life transitions, right? Cancer, divorce, bankruptcy, like all the things that create money scarcity. So like, tell me about you.
Yeah. And it's really not even so much that those experiences created lack and scarcity. It was that was where I was coming from. That's where I was living from. Right. So I was steeped in lack and scarcity. So what ended up being reflected back to me were circumstances, right? That resembled that of lack and scarcity. Yeah. Yeah. So that's right. That's really the difference. Yes. The other thing too, and the other thing too is, I spent over 20 years as a traditional financial advisor, right? Before I moved into coaching and becoming an ordained metaphysical, minister. And what I had recognized, so sure, I was recognizing things within myself, but I was also recognizing things in my clientele, right? And who was showing up, in front of me. And I think the big eye opener was back in 2008-09 when we went through the Great Recession. I was working for a major bank. I was my title was financial consultant, and I was actually a registered principal, right? So it was kind of a big, role, but what I noticed, it wasn't so much, what was happening with people's money, right? And I don't know if you remember, because back then, gosh, on paper, we were looking at 30, 40, 50% drops, right, in values, right, in assets, and the market correction, and what was happening within the market and the economy. It wasn't just happening at home, it was happening on a global scale.
Absolutely.
So there was a pretty intense volatility. And of course, our response to volatility is typically fear, right?
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
typically fear. So what I noticed was how people were reacting to what was going on around them, and how they were reacting to what they were seeing in their
Mm,
accounts, right? How they
so
were
good.
responding to the steep decline in their account values. So as you can imagine, when we are experiencing intense fear, or just fear of really of any degree, we have a tendency to be passive in
Hmm.
terms of our thinking process, right? Our thinking process, we immediately go to instinctive mode, right?
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
even we will react emotionally. Either way, because what we are afraid of is that our survival is going to be threatened,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and that we're not going to be okay, right? And so
And
then
that
we
we're not going to be
we
okay.
get into this mode of like, I have to control it, or I have to manage
Yeah,
it, or I have to overcome it, or I have to do something, and it
yeah,
creates this really frantic energy that
yes.
puts us into that survival mode.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we are in survival mode, right, you can imagine the additional thoughts. I'm not going to have enough. I'm going to lose everything. Oh my God, what am I going to do? So with this type of frantic thinking comes frantic behavior,
Sure.
right? And that behavior, especially around money, it's going to look like impulsive, right? Impulsive behavior, right? So people were selling off,
Mm.
right? They were selling, and what's, probably one of the very first things that I learned as a financial planner or advisor is buy low, sell high. And so people were massive sell off. And, they had experienced, a 50% decline in their account value, and their time horizon was
Whew.
still out there,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right. So I sat back, and I think at the time I was even working with I had a mentor, and she was more, trying to think of what she went by at the time. I think she referred to herself as an energy intuitive,
Mm.
right? But she was really, just a coach and a wonderful teacher. And I remember sitting back one day, and I was asking myself, I was like, gosh, I wonder if there's any way to take these principles of what I'm learning from her style of coaching, right? Which integrated, yes, of course, there were spiritual components, energetic and emotional components, even practical components. And I was like, gosh, I wonder if there was any way that I could integrate those principles in with traditional financial planning. Had no idea if such a thing even existed, but I did recognize where the true problem was. And the problem lies in our relationship, or I should say relationships, it's really plural, with money, right?
Absolutely.
And, yep, and the quality of our decision making process, right? So when we arrive to the choice we are about to make, are we really paying attention to our thinking process, right? Are we giving ourselves enough time to slow that thinking process down, so that we know we are truly calm and being peaceful as we approach this particular financial decision we're about to make?
It's so true. And it stands true in every area of life, right? That's how we
Yep.
know it
Yes.
across all time, across all space, across all dimension. And for me personally, really recognizing, am I in an emotional mode? Like in
Hmm.
what energy am I purchasing this with, or am I doing this with, or am I engaging this with? And I've become so clear about what my feeling state is and what the energy in my body is, that it's almost, it starts to fade away, right? Because
Yeah.
you become intuitive and you're starting to listen to that inner
Yes.
voice within,
Yep.
verse, like we say spirit, but the fear, right? Like that, the fear is all, it's all up here, right?
Right.
And when you actually like drop into the body and you get into that conscious decision making,
Yep.
right? And it applies to money and what you do with that, and your relationship with what you do with that.
Right.
Before I started working with you, I was deathly afraid
Mm.
of of actually sitting down and looking at my finances and like, I use the word, I hate the word discipline. Like for some reason, my ego and like my soul is like, I don't like that word. Like to me, that feels like it's controlling, but it actually became something where I enjoyed, right? So the language even that I was
Mhm.
using to describe my relationship with
Mhm.
money was causing inner resistance. Where now it's like, no, I actually look forward to seeing the money coming in and the flow and actually
Yeah.
deciding what I
Yeah.
want to do with it versus being like, no, I'm too afraid. Like I don't want to know my habits. Like, so I think it's just incredible, what you do and what you teach people, and why I stand behind having a money coach is
Yeah.
almost more important than having a financial planner, because you have to understand the energy behind why you're doing what you're doing and
Mhm.
why you're allocating where you're allocating, and becoming I like the word accountable with your
Yes.
relationship and the words and the language that you use to describe money.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and really what you've just done is you kind of illustrated process itself, right?
Mm,
That the process that I took you through, the process that I take everyone, through. And there really is a methodology
mm,
behind this work. So even though we're talking about emotions, we're talking about energy dynamics, we're even talking about spiritual dynamics, and we're marrying that in with practical and tactical strategy. Even though we're talking about all of that, there is a proven and a very specific step-by-step methodology to this inner work, right?
right.
And that methodology, what we end up doing is illuminating and then addressing one's hidden intrinsic or instinctive and emotional and behavioral money
Oh,
patterns, right? Patterns around
yes.
money, right? And when you start diving, because how can you transform? How can you feel better? How can you do better with money and feel better and do better with everything that money influences and impacts in your life? How can you do so if you don't know, if you don't shed light on the stuff, on the patterns that are getting in the way? Right. So, like
Yeah.
you had just said, right? Discipline, ew. Right. It felt restrictive and limiting, to you. And you almost had this, if I remember correctly, like this, I don't want to look. I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and I'm going to hope for the best. Right.
Oh gosh,
And
yeah, we could get into that, sure.
right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's very common. That is not, unusual. But once you allow that to come to light, then you recognize, oh my gosh, that there's nothing to be afraid of with that.
Yeah.
Right. And now that I have that awareness, now I'm in a position to choose again.
Yes. Yes.
Right. I can look at that pattern without judgment and now choose again. Right.
Yes. Yes.
But the whole business of you have to learn how to pay attention, right? We have to bring everything to light, learn how to pay attention, own what you notice without judgment. And then you are now in that true, how do I like to say that? In the, oh, what do they call that? Like that seat of power where choice truly
Mhm.
resides. Right now, you're in that moment where you
Yeah.
can be calm, right? Choose calmness, choose peace. And now you are in that, and you're fully present. That's when you are in the position to make really good, effective decisions, which
It's so
includes
true, and it
finances and
applies
money, right?
not only to money, right? It applies to
Yep.
all decisions, but, like, for
Yep.
the sake of our call, like, that is really your
Yep.
zone of genius, and what you're describing is what I teach my clients, like, making the unconscious conscious, right? So you do, like, in the
Yes.
spiritual, it's the shadow of our relationship
Yes.
with money, and we're gonna get into archetypes and what that means, but I wanna kind of paint a clear picture of what I went in with, right? Or what Christine is talking about here. So, full transparency and vulnerability, because I believe that when we allow ourselves to speak the truth and talk about our story, then it also gives other people permission to do the same. And because I'm no longer ashamed around or about my old habits and patterns with money, I think it's really important to talk about what I went to Christine with. Now, mind you, I didn't find Christine, like spirit put her in my lap. I
Yep.
couldn't say no
That's
if I
right.
tried. I couldn't, right? So I had a massage therapist and he was talking to me about this wealth coach that he hired. And I was like, oh, I kind of need to do that. That would be really helpful, blah, 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 blah. However, whenever it came to contacting Christine, meeting with Christine, like anything, there was a part of me, which I call like my ego, my personality self, that was like, I'm not ready. I don't have the time. I'm not willing to take this on right now because I'm too busy. I can't afford it. Like all of the excuses came in because my soul essentially knew, or my ego knew, that you're going to have to confront some things and you're going to have to change. And when we're about to
Hmm.
change and we're about to up level, we'll be met with a ton of resistance.
Yeah.
And so it finally took her reaching out to me and saying, when can we meet? And I was like, oh, I guess now.
That's right.
And so I did. And I said yes. And Christine's just amazing. And she doesn't sell. She literally just wants to get to know you. And so her first meeting was incredible. We just literally had coffee and we just talked. All my fears went out the window. All the resistance went away. I felt so comfortable. And I loved that approach because for me, probably like with many people, it takes some readiness to be able to do
Yes.
this work, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I love just how patient you were in that process. But so I'm going to read literally the money stories that you wrote down that you picked up on from
Mm.
that first session with me. And it was very, very evident. I was like, oh, wow, like this is something that I really want to work on changing, because it became so obvious to how my old patterns and my old stories and my wounding created the habits that I have with money as an adult, business owner, single mom, like all of this stuff, living in lack, really.
Hmm.
But the beliefs that you picked up on, which were probably very common with so many, especially like women, I think men tend to have a more disciplined, sort of like rigid, like relationship with money, but women are kind of like more in the dark, and we don't often take it as serious. But in my experience, anyways, with the clients that I work with that come from a lot of trauma, that
Hmm.
tends to be the case.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, it was like this belief around like there's never enough. Like I never have enough money. And this feeling of being ashamed and embarrassed because I felt like I didn't have enough. And that to hide this belief that I didn't have enough, it was a self-created or self-fulfilling prophecy of when I had it, I spent it. And
Yes.
so we had in this dialogue around this shame around being a spender or being a saver. And it's like, no, I'm supposed to be a saver because that's what society wants me to be. And right? Which I was like, no, that doesn't feel good either because I don't really want to fit into that box. I just want to be free. I'm a free bird, right? I don't want to care so much. Um, but it was to hide this pattern, I spent it. And then when I'm spending it, I get in this euphoric state, which was ultimately created by my mother from when we were so poor when I was young. Like literally, like we went from motel to motel, didn't have a place to live, got evicted from our homes. My mom didn't know how she was going to feed me sometimes. And I lived in a state of lack. But the way that she tried to overcompensate for that state of lack was when she did get a paycheck or she did get enough money bartending, we would have Sunday fun day. And so Sunday fun day meant that I could buy whatever I wanted. She would take me to the store and she would literally like say yes to anything that I purchased or that I wanted. So we would have fun. And so it became this pattern of like connection on Sundays with her to overcompensate for the feeling of being in lack all week long, which then that was the pattern that was recreated with my
Yeah.
relationship with money as
Yeah.
an adult, which you really astutely helped me figure out. So my spending patterns were a temporary euphoric state um, that did not support my long-term goal. and my long-term plan for financial security. Right. So, like, my value is in alignment with I want financial security. I don't want to have to worry about money or having enough. And so the behavior for me was not in alignment with that goal because of the unconscious programs that were still in me from my patterning from when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And how that created like this internal discord and shame. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the type of stuff that you actually get to help people with. So it's almost like having your own personal money counselor, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
and
yeah,
I love this next statement was like, ooh, this one got me. It was like money is neutral, right? Money is
yeah,
neutral, which you teach and you preach. And I
yep,
love that. And so when we consider that money is literally neutral, but it is the value that we assign to it that we are ultimately assigning to ourselves.
yes,
And so for me, that was the value that I was assigning to money, which was I never have enough, was ultimately the underlying unconscious belief about myself that I wasn't enough.
right,
Right. And that was like really eye opening for me to become aware of. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm literally creating the pattern of not being enough by spending. And then feeling that feeling, which feels awful and causes this shame, which is the underlying feeling that I used to have my whole childhood. Like
right,
that blew my mind. And I do this for a living, right?
yeah,
But to have it about something about the money aspect was like, I can do it
yes,
when it comes to trauma or like relationship. Like that's my zone of genius. But when it came to money, it was like these blind spots that I could not get in touch with until I really started working with you. And you really helped point out those patterns, which is incredible, right? Like it's neutral. It's just the value. It's the language that we're giving it
yeah,
that makes
yeah,
it not so.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So and there's actually a line. It's Shakespeare's play, Hamlet. I think it's Hamlet. The line, nothing is either good or bad. It's
Mm,
thinking that makes it so,
it's so true.
right?
Yeah.
So when we look at money, um, yeah, money is neutral. It is literally nothing. It has no value, right? Put the monetary value aside, right? It has no inherent value. It is neutral until you decide to assign it its value. And
Mm,
the value that you assign to it is again reflective of how you feel about yourself, what you choose to believe about yourself, right? So think of money as a mirror,
yes. Oh, it
right?
is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Right. So if we're able to, look at money as our mirror, it's simply reflecting back to us aspects of ourselves, right? Aspects of ourselves, characteristics, tendencies that some are positive, absolutely, and some are negative or operate, as you mentioned earlier, operate in the shadow, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
until those shadow patterns are brought to light, they're going to continue to undermine all of our best efforts,
So true.
right?
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I love the exercise you did. You actually took me through the mother father mirror exercise.
Yes. Yep.
So that was incredibly eye-opening for me around like, wow, like again, light bulb of literally the relationship that I have with money is mirroring.
Yes.
um so how did you well, talk about that, talk about how the relationships with essentially like I think it was biological parents or anybody that influenced you with money. What was the exercise?
Yeah, yeah. So mother, father, mirror. So what you do is you take your mother, your father, or and any other individual, or if you didn't grow up with the tradition in a traditional family setting, it could be anyone that was of significant influence
Mm,
when you were growing up, especially during the ages of 2 and 12, right?
yeah.
Because that's when the vast majority of our development, is occurring. Believe it or not, between the ages of 2 and 12, that's when we establish our relationships with money.
Yes, that
I know
blew
it's
my mind, and
crazy.
I knew that intuitive. I'm like, yeah, I know that.
I know. Yep.
I can see it. But to
Yep.
actually have it written down and to see it like on
Mm-hmm.
paper was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a game changer for me
Yeah.
around like now I know why I was led to you and I'm fully ready to change.
Yeah. And remember, it wasn't just mom, dad, or another relative, right? Where you were looking for certain patterns. You also identify those patterns that, poof, you made up on your own,
That's
right? It
right.
wasn't
That's right.
necessarily modeled, to you. It was something that was self-actualized, right? It just, yeah, was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then and from that exercise, you then have a clear picture of all of the good stuff, right? The positive characteristics, the strengths, right? The positive patterns that, right? And you could see those clearly. And okay, great. These are the ones that I want to honor. And I
Mhm.
do want to keep those in my awareness because those are the patterns that I want to keep at the forefront of my decision making around money and anything else. Okay. Then you also could see very clearly all of the patterning, where the patterns came from that are working against you, right? That are
Absolutely.
actually sabotaging your best efforts, right? Because remember, I
Yes.
think because a lot of times I hear, um, what's an example? I don't like the word budget. I prefer the word, conscious spending plan, right? But we have these we're supposed to be paying attention to our money on a day-to-day basis or have some type of cash flow,
Mhm.
plan in place. And and what I hear a lot of is I'm not able to stick with it. I can get on board and I'm doing, really well for a period of time. And then I just fall off, the
Mhm.
wagon. I can't stick to this a healthy and helpful, behavior. And it's a really important behavior if you're working towards midterm or long-term, goals. Um, and I remember, people will say another thing people will say is, how come I can on my other life facets or my other areas of life, they feel really good and I feel on target and I feel, in the flow. But when it comes to money, everything comes undone,
Mm.
right?
So
Everything
true.
comes
Yeah.
undone,
Yep.
right? So all of that is explained when you look at the negative or the patterning, right? The belief and behavioral patterns that um, that are operating, in the shadow. And so, as
Underneath,
I said
right?
earlier,
So true.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So once you see them written out in front of you, we can't ignore them anymore.
Yes, and I love that, that time frame, right? Between 2 to 12 like you talked about, which you also helped me identify the 4 survivor archetypes that
Yes.
are formed during that age
Yeah.
frame and
Yeah.
how those come in as creepy little shadows to influence our money making decisions. So can you talk a little bit about what those survivor archetypes are and kind of how they influence our spending or saving patterns when it comes to money?
Yeah, so the 4 survival archetypes, and we all have them.
Mm,
Each and every one of us come into this world with these 4 survival archetypes as our companions,
mm,
right? And I do believe if for those that may not be familiar, with archetypes, I mean, my gosh, archetypes or archetypal patterns or archetypal language that dates as far back as Plato. It was Plato that first came up with that idea. I think he
yeah.
referred to them as little personalities.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
fast forward to, modern day, right? We move through the Joseph Campbell and the Thomas Merlins and even Carl Jung, right? We have the Jungian archetypes, and then we have someone like Carolyn Mace who took the Jungian archetypes and married it in with spirituality.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. I love it. And
yeah.
so just
So
so you know, the quick definition of an archetype, it's a universal uh thing that everybody knows exactly what that means. So if I tell
yeah,
you king, we all know what that represents, right? So an
yes,
archetype is something that across all cultures, across all humanity, everybody knows what that picture is in their mind. So it fits across all dimension. And so what she's saying is like there's these four survivor archetypes that we all have relationships with internally.
yes, yep, exactly. And all archetypes are neutral,
Mm,
right? So, and they have a light side and a shadow
love
side,
that.
right?
Mhm.
Right. So depending on where we are, right? If we're in the present moment, then we are in a place of power, which means that particular archetype is going to express itself from the light side,
Mm,
right? So it
mhm.
will be positive and strengthening, right? But if we are either stuck in the past or we're anxious and connected, right? Because we're worried about the future, then we are coming to this decision from a place of disempowerment, which means whatever archetype is in operation, you're operating from its shadow.
Yes.
Right. So hopefully
Yeah.
that gives a little bit, but
Yeah.
we all speak, right? We all speak this archetypal language. We just don't have the awareness, which
That's
is
right.
why when we're looking to affect not just positive change, but sustainable change, self awareness is key. And that's where these archetypes come in. They help to build your level of self awareness,
That's
right?
right.
So the four survival archetypes, and people will probably giggle when they hear the four words, especially one in particular,
Mhm.
but you're going to know, you're going to be able to instantly connect with their meaning.
Yes.
The child,
Mm.
right? So the first survival archetype is the child archetype. And there's actually, I think it's 6 different variations come with the child archetype. So there's the magical child, there's the abandoned child, there's the wounded child, there's the nature child, right? And I forget the last two, but there's 6 variations of the child, archetype. And that's the first survival archetype. The second one is the saboteur. The third one is the prostitute. And
Mhm.
yes, again, we all, men and women and non-gender, we come into this world with prostitute. Right?
Yeah.
So the prostitute. And then the last one is the victim. And the
Mhm.
victim, in my uh personal and professional opinion, I believe the victim is the overarching archetype. I believe it really governs, all archetypes.
Yeah,
Um,
and so just to give a quick synopsis of how that looked for me personally, like my child archetype, like the shadow of that was completely in fantasy mode, complete around
yeah.
like um someone coming in to like save me financially or give me that security, or I could spend as much as I want, or I could play with all this money that I did not have at the time. And
Yeah.
so the saboteur would come in, and then whenever I did have a significant amount of money saved, I would find a way to spend it and sabotage my progress. The prostitute would come
Mhm.
in and would essentially sell myself short when it came to what I would charge for like my coaching package or for therapy or whatever the case was, is I wouldn't charge what I was worth because I would essentially sell myself short and put the other person's needs before mine. And
Mhm.
then the victim was the concept of like, I never have enough because I didn't come from enough and nobody ever taught me how to manage my money. And it would be these things that were constantly running in the background before I started working with Christine that I think I was aware of, but to have it there and to work with someone to one, not shame it, because
Right.
the judgment of it is actually worse than the behavior itself,
Right.
especially in the energetic realm, but also to bring it aware of like, oh yeah, like this makes sense. Is that really what I want? And Christine had an amazing way of using the other four archetypes that we're all aware of, which is like our king or queen, the warrior, magician, and the lover, which also have their shadow sides as well. But it's if you
Mhm.
bring in the positive warrior, like with conviction to like work on how to manage these other behaviors and stories around your money and develop a conscious plan that works with you, and not only works with you, are in line with what your values are, then this stuff
Yes.
starts to like shift or change, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, even as you were talking, I could see all the various, archetypes popping up.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we have the four survival archetypes. There's also the eight money types
Mm,
or the eight money archetypes, right? And
interesting.
you'll see
Okay.
a little bit and there's a little bit of overlap, right? Because there's a couple of survival archetypes that are included in the eight money archetypes. So the eight money
Oh,
archetypes,
this is interesting. Okay.
yeah, this was actually developed by Deborah Price, who is the CEO and founder of the Money Coaching Institute. That's where I earned my certification in money coaching. So, and Deborah she's a true pioneer in this field because
Mm,
the Money Coaching Institute. She's been doing this work for better than 25 years. I
beautiful.
yeah. So this is not anything new, but what I respect about Deborah and the whole again, it's a methodology. These money archetypes are a part of that step by step methodology that she teaches and that we ultimately teach and coach um as money coaches. But what I truly appreciate and respect is that she did not deviate from the Jungian archetypal names, right? From the
Mm,
names themselves, right? Even
love
just
it.
like Carolyn Mace, she didn't change the names. She held true, right, to the Jungian archetypes. And I appreciate that because I think when we start changing names, it just gets too muddied and
Sure.
confusing. So the
Absolutely.
eight money archetypes are the innocent, which is one of the child
Mm,
survivals, right? It's one of the variations of the child archetype. So the innocent, the victim,
hmm.
the warrior, the martyr, the fool, the creator artist, the tyrant, and the magician. So there's your eight,
Love it.
right? And the two, again, the two survival archetypes would be the innocent and the victim, right? So they're
Yeah.
integrated, into the eight money archetypes. So why would we want to come to know what these money archetypes look like on how would they be helpful? Well, it's super helpful to know what is influencing your decision making process, right? I think we
Absolutely.
established that, right? Because if we look at neuroscience, 95% of our thinking process occurs at a passive or unconscious level,
Hmm.
right? Through the instinctive and the emotional brains, right? We are
Yes.
instinctive or reactive.
So true.
Okay. 95% of our thinking process is unconscious. That leaves only 5% where we are truly aware or conscious or mindful or deliberate, right?
Yes.
And if we remember, and I think a lot of people forget this, all behavior comes out of beliefs and attitudes.
Mm, so true.
Right? That's why
Yes.
we can't just change a behavior and think that it's going to result in positive and sustainable change. It won't. It'll be
That's right.
temporary,
That's
right?
right.
Because you
Yep.
didn't address the behavior and the result and the attitudes, right? That's where everything begins. Everything begins with thought, right? So these archetypes, the money archetypes in particular, help you become more aware of your thought patterns, right? Your thought patterns about money, about other people, about your work, about your business, about yourself, and about your relationship with spirit, God,
So
right?
true. It's so
Right.
true.
And when we
Yes.
have, right. So again, the
So true.
greater our level of self-awareness, we're going to be better and more effective decision makers. And as healthy decision makers, now we truly are giving ourselves or are setting the stage for being able to fully step into our highest potential, whatever that may look like.
Yeah. And what's coming, I forgot we went into this around my relationship with God or spirit.
Yeah.
in the sense of what it really was mirroring back to me was how much I felt like I was alone and trying to do this
Yeah.
on my own
Right.
and not letting go of the branch or letting go and letting
Yes.
God.
Branch.
This
Yes.
this reference is really funny. I met with a spiritual teacher and I had a conversation with her around my relationship with money or finances before I met Christine. So it's interesting she came in later. But there was an image that came where Father God came into the reading, and I was like
Mm.
holding on to this branch for like dear life, and like just feeling like, no, I got to do this on my own. Like I can't let go. I can't trust. I can't trust. And so the teacher was said, like, God is saying, Alicia, when are you going to let go of the branch? When are you going to let me be the foundation underneath you that you trust? And that has been really a statement that resonated with me for like the last 3 years around the ways that I am not trusting spirit, the way that I'm feeling like I have to do this on my own. And it's my hard work and it's my will that's going to get me to where I want to be in my life. And that's just simply not true because, what you teach is how to like bring spirit in to your finances and your decision making so that it's not just you running the show, right?
Yeah.
It was a beautiful thing that you were able to help me really understand what that meant and how all this old stuff that was underneath it was really the driving force behind my behavior with money.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, so even back to the neuroscience research and neuroscience, that third brain is referred to as the thinking brain.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's where only 5% of our thinking occurs that is truly active or present or conscious. What a lot of people don't understand, or they just don't know, is that in that third thinking brain, where 5% of active, truly present thinking happens, that's where our rational and logical thought occurs. You want to know why? Because that is also where we have access to higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that there's a gross misunderstanding, especially in the financial industry. And let me say this. I've been coaching now for what, 13 years. And for better than a decade, I was on my own, had my own coaching practice. In the last 2.5 years, I have been blessed to now be situated inside of a financial firm because I truly believe this is where I can have the greatest impact and influence. And
Good.
the all of the planners and the analysts that I am surrounded by on a daily basis, it is such a blessing to be surrounded by people that are open to doing work in this way. They really see, the value in this. And I did have to do a little bit of work, even with those that I work with, to help them understand that our intellect is always guided by the heart, and whether
Mm,
the heart is open or the heart is shut down.
yes, that
Right.
makes sense.
So when we look at it, even from a money type or money archetype perspective, it's the warrior and the magician versus all of the other archetypes that tend to work out of the shadow. Right.
Mm,
So the warrior is master of the physical world or the material world or the financial world. They're task oriented, they're goal oriented, they're going to follow directions. They're going to take advice from professionals that they trust. So, but the actions that the warrior will take is only as good as the advice or the guidance that they're being given. Hence the magician, and
mhm,
why the magician is the ideal money type or money archetype. And we want the magician to be of primary influence,
mm,
right? Because it is the magician that has access to our heart center. It has absolute clarity on what our
yes,
core values are and what matters most, right? It
mhm,
has learned all of their lessons from the past, right? And because of that, it allows themselves to be fully present and aware and conscious and in a position to make effective, truly healthy decisions, right? That are truly aligned with well-being around money and anything else,
So true.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of a teacher that I worked with recently about the four faces of God, that are
Mm.
represented this way are like the king, warrior, magician, lover,
Ah,
or right, like trust, compassion,
yeah.
power, and grace. And so, in the way that we treat ourselves with money and we access these positive archetypes within us, which we all have, by the way, right? They're all innate, they're all they're all at our core. It's just
Yeah,
our shadows that keep them from coming into light in a
that's
more
right.
positive way.
That's right.
We get to now dance in that realm with spirit, with God, with how we're looking at ourselves through our money beliefs and patterns.
Right. Right. Exactly. I'm going to show it, right? So
Oh, please do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
your Instagram post
Yeah.
here, wait, let me take off my Post-it note,
Woo!
my cheat sheet for remembering
Yeah,
certain
please
things.
do.
But yeah, I don't know. Can you see it?
Oh, it's a little, we'll hold it up a little. There it is. There we go.
There it
It
is.
says,
Okay.
so to be spiritually asleep is one who is constantly worried about the future and locked into their past. They
Mm-hmm.
feel separate from God. One who is spiritually awake is one who is curious about their future, heals their past, and is living in the moment and feels that they are one with God.
Yeah. So
Love it.
if I were to interpret, because this is all archetype.
All right.
This is all
Yeah.
archetypal language. So okay, so your description of those that are spiritually asleep. Okay, so now and I'm doing this through the context of one's relationships with money. Okay, so
Got
we're
it.
still talking money.
Yep.
So if you are spiritually asleep with respect to money, so let's see, one who is constantly worried about the future.
Mm,
Okay, so so the money type, one that is constantly worried about the future. Okay, so this could actually be one of two. And
okay.
oftentimes what'll happen is that these money archetypes will partner up with one another. They'll collude.
Mm, yep.
Right. All
Yep.
right. So one who is constantly worried about the future. So, you know what? I'm going to go with tyrant.
Okay.
Okay.
What does that
Because
mean?
the the tyrant, the tyrant could be financially successful. Oftentimes they are,
Mm,
but they're fearful and they worry
yes.
and they suffer from chronic not enoughness,
Oh, so
right?
good. Yes.
Yeah. And I have worked over the course of whatever, over a decade, I have worked with many multi-millionaires who suffer from that, right? Right. All of their decision making comes from the shadow aspect of the tyrant, right? So
That makes
always
a lot of
worried,
sense.
right? And if they're worried about the future, this could also be part innocent money type or money archetype, right? Because
Okay.
the innocent suffers from anxiety. And the
Mm,
innocent is also fearful. It just
yes.
could be expressed in a different way, right? Because the innocent was the one who would take the ostrich approach. Nope, I don't want to deal with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The ostrich
I'm gonna,
approach. I
I'm
love
gonna,
that.
yep, I'm gonna bury my head
I
in
was
the
like, "Ooh."
sand,
Oh,
and
that
I'm
was
gonna
so
hope,
me.
right? And I'm gonna hope that somebody can come to my rescue,
I love it. It's so
right?
true. And that was how I lived, like literally
Yeah,
the first half of my life until I got in a position where it was like, no more.
yeah,
This got to shift, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
then let's see. So constantly worried about the future and locked into their past.
Mm,
So the money type there, and this is actually one of the survival archetypes as well. This is the victim.
mm,
So the
yes.
victim, right? The
Hmm.
victim lives in the past and is unwilling to forgive it
Mm,
and themselves so that they can move forward,
so
right?
true. Yeah.
They literally live in their wounds, right?
Mm,
Or they play the blame game.
yeah. Yeah, the
right?
martyr's actually coming up for me as well with that a bit,
Yes. Yeah.
as far as that
Self-sacrificing.
that victim mentality, or everything bad always happens to me. I don't deserve good, like all that mentality.
Yeah. 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 That could be a little self-tyrant, right? You got a little bit of bullying, self-bullying, going
Sure.
on, or even the saboteur. So that's right. So we were able
Makes
to
sense.
identify the archetypal patterns there,
Yeah,
right? That are right on
absolutely.
the shadow side. That would mean, oh gosh, that totally means now I know, red flag, my decision making is passive. I am not in the present moment, right? I am either out there in the future or I'm back there in the past,
Oh, that's so good.
right?
Yeah.
I am not in the present moment. I'm not calm. I'm not at peace. Now, spiritually awake, one who is curious about the future and heals their past.
Mm.
Who did I say has healed their past? Magician,
Yeah.
right? The
Yes.
magician, the magician money archetype. I like to think of the magician too as the non judgmental, silent observer.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that one always, I'm like, oh, it's lovely. It just
And
feels
that's,
lovely.
yeah, that's what you helped me channel when I eventually got to the place where I was like, okay, I'm going to look at my finances every week, but I'm going to bring in the magician. I'm going to bring in neutral. I say, I'm going to bring in Jesus. We're going to bring in Jay.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring in Jay.
We're going to do this in a way where I'm just curious,
Yeah,
right? I'm just
exactly.
observing what's
Just
going on
watching.
here. Yeah,
Exactly. And when you
absolutely.
choose to do that, that brings you, into the present moment. And you know what? I was just guided to this morning when I was doing
Mm.
my own little practice. And so I was guided to a certain page in a book, and oh God, I have it written down right here. How funny. Yeah. It's miracles rest on flat feet.
Ooh,
Right? They have
interesting.
no arches. They have no arches. Okay, so what does this mean? How do I look at this symbolically? Well, when we think of arches, what the message, what he's really talking about, and this is Jay, by the way, Jesus, by the way, what he's talking about is time, right?
Mm,
The arc of time. He's talking about linear time, right? And
that
namely,
makes sense.
the future and the past. Okay.
That makes
But
sense.
miracles can only happen. And the miracle is where we shift our perspective, right? When we move from that place of fear and into that place of peace.
Yes.
Okay. That can only occur when you're flat footed. Because think about it. If your weight is in your heels, you're going to fall backwards. You're in the
Wow.
past. If your
Mm.
weight is in your toes, you're kind of leaning forward into the future. So more than likely your thoughts or your fear-based thoughts are about worry into the future. They're projecting into the future, right? So we have to
Okay.
bring ourselves back to flat feet so we can be present, aligned with the magician. That's when we are
Love
in a
it.
position to make good and healthy decisions. And again, these decisions that we're making, yes, a lot of them are practical in nature, right? And this is where, when you're working with a financial advisor or a financial planner, having this awareness will only enhance the relationship that you have with your planner or advisor,
Absolutely. And
right?
to feel confident in
Yes.
what
Yeah,
you want to do and what you feel is right for
that's right.
you and your goals with your money.
That's right.
Right. Going into that meeting, not like before I met you, I did not I didn't feel confident about it. I essentially
Yeah.
was the prostitute. I was like, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I had no
Yeah.
awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and now it feels actually really good and empowering to say, like, this is what I want, this is what I desire. Help me figure out a plan to get there, and make it practical to put into practice, right? So that financial planner gave me a whole bunch of spreadsheets to put into practice that I
Yeah.
did not use because I did not want to look.
Right.
um, but now it's like, oh, okay, this is actually exciting. This can be fun. This is neutral.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even myself, and I know you and I have talked about this, before. Yes, I've had major life transitions that were tough, especially, financially. But this is always a work, in progress, right? There's no quick fix. So even with myself and how money operates in my world, right? I have to remain committed and vigilant
Mm,
in my practices, as well. So what I teach, right? What I coach to, it is alive in my world. I practice it in my world on a daily basis. And to give you even a quick example, I too, the innocent money archetype can be of active influence for me as well. How do I know this? Well, I've learned to recognize when I'm overwhelmed.
yeah.
I don't care what caused the overwhelm. When I'm in overwhelm, I recognize it, right? And I know then how to shift, because it means I got to slow my thinking process down, right? And then I'm in a
Yes.
position to know what the next and right and best step is. So one of the things with the overwhelm thing, you mentioned, Excel spreadsheets, right? Budgeting or conscious spending plan, cash flow plan, Excel spreadsheets. A lot of them can be really complicated,
Yeah.
right? And I know for myself, if there's a lot of stuff on one page, my eyes will swim. Overwhelm. I am automatic because I'm visually sensitive,
Yeah.
right? Um, so knowing that about myself, I need simplification. I
Mhm.
need a simple system. So what I ended up doing, because for whatever reason, there's a lot of innocents that engage with me. They too
Yeah.
struggle, right? They struggle with tracking the day-to-day stuff. They struggle with implementing or with the creation of and the implementation of a cash flow or conscious spending plan. Why? Because they get overwhelmed.
Makes so much
So I
sense.
worked with one
Absolutely.
of, yeah, so I worked with one of my colleagues, Mario, who is fan friggin' tastic in terms of the practical and tactical stuff when it comes
Okay.
to, so he and I, we put our heads together. I said, look, this is what's going on with my clients. What what can we do, like in terms of a cash flow spreadsheet? Can we simplify what we have here? What ends up what is you just give them another option, right? So we ended
Beautiful.
up,
Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome. I use it myself and it is so much easier.
Wow.
So much easier. Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So see, that's what can happen, right? When you build, when you work on your level of self-awareness, you learn about the money types that are either of active or passive influence in your current decision making, right? When
Mhm.
you come to understand your patterns around money, and then you take those proactive steps to heal and transform the patterns that are getting in your way, now you're in a place to implement really good practical and sound strategies.
Yes. And I love the position that you come from, right? When it comes to people seeking help for this, that can be met with so much resistance and so much shame
Mhm.
and ultimately fear.
Yeah.
You come at it from a way of like, there is no judgment, right?
Mm-mm.
There really is not. And you have a beautiful way of going at someone's own pace for what they want to
Yeah.
change, for the work that
Yeah.
they want to do, what they want to be aware of. And I think it really is the first step to financial. I don't even like the word success because that feels out of alignment, but um, awareness, right?
Yeah.
Financial awareness. And it's okay with whatever state that you're at, where whether you're a spender or a saver, whether you're someone who, makes a ton of money, or whether you're someone that's still just getting by. All of the tools that Christine is teaching really can be used in a very incredibly practical way, no matter
Hmm.
where you're at in your life right now. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes we tend to think of like, I need to have this much money before I go and I hire somebody for help, or whatever story we want to attach to why we're not seeking that person to be there with us and to walk with us on our money journey. Like, it's okay to overcome and to confront now, because you can't change
Mhm.
anything that you're not aware of. And without the right appropriate help from a certified coach who knows the energetics, who knows exactly how to help get you there and get you in touch with what you need to be aware of, like you will just keep spinning and these patterns will just keep repeating and you'll feel more defeated every year. And that's what we're trying to change, right? Because the
Yeah.
world is abundant. We are abundant. Everything that we need really is inside of us if we just choose to do that inner work and listen,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So what do you
Exactly.
say to people that is resistant? Like what are you know, how do you walk somebody through um like their I guess their willingness to meet with you or to start to tackle this?
Yeah, you said this right at the very beginning, right? When you and I met, it was just a simple conversation,
Mm,
right? Because when I come to a conversation, um, I make no assumptions. I have no expectations, right? My intention is to meet the other individual where they're at,
mm,
right? Because I don't know where their readiness and willingness is. Only they do,
that's right.
right? And sometimes they're not even going to recognize their readiness and willingness until they feel safe within the conversation, right? So one of the first things, okay, so we one of two ways. We either just have a conversation,
Mm,
right? There's no pre-work or anything like that. We just have the conversation and we allow it to go wherever it's meant to go. Or the other thing that we can do, because I now have this, which is pretty exciting. I now have the online money types quiz.
beautiful.
Yep.
Yes.
So it takes 5 minutes.
Yeah. And where do
Five
we find
minutes.
that?
So you know what? Should I type it in the chat box?
I'm going to put it in the show notes, but go ahead and say it out
Okay.
loud now.
Uh, yeah, well, it's
Is it?
okay. So you have to go to noteadvisor.com.
Got it.
Okay. I'll send you the link too. I don't have the link memorized.
Okay. All right.
Um,
So that will be in the show notes. So make sure you take your money
yes.
type quiz.
Yeah, so you could take the money
Beautiful.
type quiz. It'll take you 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then from there you can indicate in the quiz if you want to have a compliment. I think but I don't like the language. I should probably change it, but it's a complimentary consultation. It's just a stinking conversation
Yeah.
about your scores. Right?
That's
Easy
it.
peasy. It's a lovely way to dip your toes in the water, kind of get a feel, for what it is
Mhm.
that we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
The business behind learning, what is currently influencing the effectiveness of your financial decision making. What exactly are the money archetypes that are involved, right? What are the patterns, right, that are showing
Mhm.
up? Yeah, so when we have the conversation, I can give you a little bit of insight, right? What's working
Yes.
for you, what's working against you. And then again, you decide, right? You're
That's
going to
right.
decide if you're ready.
I love the fact that you can really work with anyone because
Yeah,
you
yeah,
it really is it's such an individual process for how we for
yeah,
our relationships with money, and because you have that foundation and that background, really it can help absolutely anyone with where they're at in their money
yeah.
story, right? Because what you also have taught me, which I um now use, which I know is also from the Course in Miracles, it's like it's the
Mm,
special relationship that we
mm,
have with money that
mm-hmm,
influences how we feel about ourselves. Like we give it
mm-hmm.
so much power, and anything that
That's
we
right.
give power to, we then have a special relationship with that then makes us feel disempowered or like we are in lack. And
Right.
I love the language around no, 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 no. Like I am the creator. I am the one that gets to decide how I feel about money and how I feel about myself. And this is just an avenue for me to play in that realm with.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I know I had mentioned earlier I'm now, seated or situated inside of a financial firm. Um, if you want to have a conversation and let's say if it ends up, you're interested in engaging, I want people to know you do not have to be a note advisor financial planning or investment client. It can just be coaching and only coaching, right? Because even
That's
you,
what I did. Yeah, yeah.
Alicia,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's what you did.
you were just my coach. I have
Yeah,
no affiliation with your firm and who you work with.
right.
But it just makes sense for your business to be actually seated there. Like, I get it. And my understanding is that you also can coach people like nationally, internationally. Like, they don't need to be local, correct? Like, your license
And
doesn't
yeah,
limit
and
to that.
yeah. Globally,
Yay.
yeah,
Beautiful. Not that you want to work at like all hours of the day, but
and
I
I,
think that it's wonderful that you're not tied into like
yeah,
state lines like I am with my
correct.
counseling license. Beautiful.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good point. That is true. Yeah, I work with people all over the country, all over the world. I mean, because look, we're blessed with this kind of technology.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So I just want to share a quote that you sent me.
Oh
Because
gosh, what
Christine,
did I send you?
oh no, it's just the picture from yesterday, which I love, right?
Oh,
And it's,
okay.
yeah, it's your task is not to seek for wealth, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it.
Yeah,
Roomy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
true.
And you
So
know what?
true.
I found out that quote, it's actually not a Rumi quote. It actually
No?
came from A Course in Miracles. Yes, because it was Gary Renard who he posted it,
Oh
and I
my
was like,
goodness.
oh my God, I had no idea. But yeah,
Wow.
yes. But
Yeah, it's
that's
removing the barriers, right?
exactly,
We are already
exactly,
everything we need. Oh,
exactly.
I love it.
There's no like oh so okay, to put this around the context of money and finances. We already have financial success. We already
Mm,
have financial abundance. We don't experience it because of the blocks and barriers that we erected. So the work involved, right? It truly is inner work. The inner work involved is in removing those blocks and barriers that we put up.
it's
It's
so
the
true.
undoing, right? It is literally the undoing.
Yes, and it is a almost like a remembering
Yeah,
of our innate worth and our innate value
yeah,
that
of what we already are.
what we already are, and removing all that is in the way for us fully embodying that as our truth.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love it. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you feel called to share before we tell people where to find you?
No,
No.
yeah, we covered it.
We did. We went
We
deep and
did.
I loved it. And
Good. Me too.
it's always a pleasure whether we meet just for coffee or whether we have a conversation in the grocery store.
Right? Or the grocery. I know. How funny is that? Oh
Christine
my
is,
gosh.
as you can see, she's just such a grounded person and a wealth of knowledge and information to have on your side. So I hope that you understand from this call that there is nothing to be ashamed about when it comes to your money story or the beliefs that you have around that, and that you have the power to change it if you
Mhm.
really choose to do that inner work and dig deep and have the desire to align with your true self and know that the answers are within you. It just really takes a good professional and coach and non-judgmental cheerleader to help you um, figure out how to create the life that you want to live outside of all of the programs and the things that you've been taught that you're carrying within you.
Yeah.
So,
Beautifully stated, Alicia. And thank
uh,
you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
yes, thank you. I will put it in the show notes where to find Christine. She is at noteadvisors.com if you want to get to her immediately. But this has been a pleasure. And I cannot thank you enough for bringing my awareness to these archetypes, to what's my unconscious patterning, so that I can finally
Mhm.
create the life of wealth and abundance that I deserve and desire.
It's your
And
birthright.
it is my birthright, and I'm loving it, and it's
That's
great,
right.
and I accept it and I receive it, and I no longer deny it, because it is in that denial that keeps us in suffering, right? It keeps us living in
Right.
lack. And I feel that we are now in a new age of energy on the planet where we are all ready to shift and change all of that. So
Yeah.
thanks again, Christine. I wish
Thank
you and your
you.
practice like the most Success, for
Thank you.
whoever you feel called to work with. I know that you're just going to make a profound impact on
Thank you.
people's energy and really how they feel about themselves, which has a ripple effect across the planet.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for the work that you've done with me and the work that you continue to do in the world. You truly are a beacon of light, and I love you.
Right back at you. Love you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for staying to the end of the episode, everybody. I hope that you experienced exactly what it is that you need to know so that you can understand that whatever your relationship is with money, it is not permanent. You have an inner voice inside of you that is always guiding you, that is always leading you to your rightful path of abundance. So make sure that you take that money quiz and make sure that you choose to work with someone, even if it isn't Christine, to get yourself on track without shame, without blame, and without judgment so that you can build the life that you desire and deserve. And if you have any issues around the beliefs that we were talking about, you can always go to my website and download my free guide to dismantle the most 3 unhelpful beliefs that you're carrying in your nervous system about your past. So, thanks for tuning in, and make sure you click that like button or subscribe so that you never miss an episode.